My name is Victoria Chen. I'm 34 years old, and I work in private equity acquisitions. That's the polite way of saying I buy struggling companies, strip out what's broken, and either flip them or rebuild them from the ground up. It's not glamorous. It's spreadsheets, due diligence, and late-night calls with lawyers who bill by the 6-minute increment. But on a Tuesday afternoon in March, standing in the marble lobby of Crestmont Analytics, while my younger brother Derek smirked at me from across the reception desk, none of that mattered. What mattered was the sentence he'd just said. You can't afford this. He wasn't talking about the building, he was talking about respect. I didn't respond. I adjusted the strap of my leather portfolio, smiled at the receptionist, and walked back through the revolving doors into the cold Seattle drizzle. My car was parked 3 blocks away. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked with the same measured pace I'd practiced for years, the kind that makes people move out of your way without realizing why. When I reached my car, I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, watching raindrops slide down the windshield in crooked lines. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. But something inside me had shifted, not broken, clarified. Derek thought he knew me. He thought he understood what I was capable of. He was wrong, and I was about to prove it. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you like this video. Before I explain what happened next, you need to understand how we got here. Derek and I grew up in a split-level house in Bellevue, the kind of neighborhood where every family had a minivan and a yard they never used. Our parents, Michael and Susan Chen, were first-generation college graduates who believed in 2 things: education and hierarchy. Derek was the youngest, I was the eldest. That distinction colored everything. When Derek struggled in math, they hired a tutor. When I struggled in chemistry, they told me to work harder. When Derek wanted to play lacrosse, they bought him equipment and drove him to practice. When I asked to join the debate team, they said it would interfere with my responsibilities at home. Responsibilities. That was their favorite word for me. Derek had potential. I had responsibilities. I learned to cook dinner when I was 12. I learned to forge their signatures on permission slips when I was 14. I learned to pay bills online when I was 16, the year Derek forgot to turn in his college applications, and my mother spent 3 weeks in bed, too depressed to function. I was the one who called the admissions offices. I was the one who drove Derek to his interviews. I was the one who wrote his supplemental essays while he played video games in the basement. He got into UC San Diego. My parents threw him a party. When I got into the University of Washington on a partial scholarship, my father said, "Good. You'll save us money by staying local." I stopped expecting things after that. I worked 2 jobs during college, graduated with honors, and moved into a studio apartment in Capitol Hill that smelled like cigarette smoke and regret. Derek, meanwhile, lived in a fraternity house, failed half his classes, and came home every summer to complain about how hard college was. My parents listened. They sympathized. They sent him money. When I asked for help with rent during my senior year, my mother said, "You're an adult now, Victoria. We can't keep bailing you out." I hadn't asked them for anything in 3 years. After graduation, I took a job at a mid-sized investment firm doing grunt work, formatting pitch decks, running comps, cold calling potential clients. It was soul-crushing, but I learned. I watched how deals were structured, how leverage worked, how to read a balance sheet in under 5 minutes. Derek, after finally graduating a year late, moved back home. He spent 6 months finding himself, which mostly involved sleeping until noon and asking our parents for gas money. When he finally got a job as a junior analyst at Crestmont Analytics, a boutique consulting firm in downtown Seattle, my parents acted like he'd been appointed to the Supreme Court. They threw another party. They posted on Facebook. They called relatives I hadn't spoken to in years to brag about Derek's big break. I wasn't invited to the party. I found out about it from an aunt's comment thread. That was 5 years ago. Over those 5 years, Derek's career followed a predictable trajectory. He coasted on charm, missed deadlines, blamed others when projects failed, and somehow still got promoted. Crestmont wasn't a meritocracy. It was a networking club with a consulting license. My career, meanwhile, took a different path. I left the investment firm and joined a private equity fund focused on distressed assets. I worked 18-hour days. I learned how to value companies that were actively bleeding money. I learned how to negotiate with creditors who wanted blood. And I learned how to be patient. By the time I was 30, I'd led 3 successful acquisitions. By 32, I was a partner. By 34, I had my own fund. Small, discreet, ruthlessly efficient. I didn't broadcast my success. I didn't post on LinkedIn. I drove a 10-year-old Subaru and lived in the same studio apartment because I was too busy to care about appearances. My parents didn't know what I did for a living. When they asked, I said, finance. They assumed I was a bank teller. Derek knew slightly more. He knew I worked in private equity, but he didn't understand what that meant. To him, I was still his older sister who wore sensible shoes and never went on vacation. He had no idea I could buy and sell his entire career before lunch. The Tuesday afternoon incident started innocently enough. I'd been in Seattle for a client meeting, and on a whim, I decided to stop by Crestmont's office. Derek had mentioned he worked there, and I thought it might be nice to surprise him. Maybe grab coffee. I know. Stupid. When I walked into the lobby, the receptionist asked if I had an appointment. I said I was there to see Derek Chen. She called upstairs. A minute later, Derek appeared, looking annoyed. Victoria, what are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood. Thought we could catch up. He glanced back toward the elevators, then at me, like I was a problem he needed to solve quickly. I'm kind of busy. Maybe another time? Sure, no problem. I started to turn, but then he said it. Actually, you know what? Come up for a second. I'll give you the tour. I should have left, but I didn't. We took the elevator to the 14th floor. The office was sleek. Glass walls, exposed brick, ergonomic chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Derek walked me through the main workspace, pointing out features like he was showing off a new car. This is the collaboration zone. That's the executive wing. Over there's the coffee bar. We have a barista on staff. Nice, I said. We stopped in front of a conference room where a group of analysts were gathered around a table laughing at something on a laptop. Derek waved. One of them, a guy in a polo shirt, called out, Yo, Derek, who's your friend? My sister, Derek said. She's in finance, polo shirt grinned. Oh yeah, which firm? Small shop, I said. You wouldn't know it. Try me. I named my fund. Blank stares. See? Derek said, laughing. Told you. Then he turned to me and his expression shifted. Not cruel, just dismissive, like he was talking to a child. Honestly, Vic, I don't know how you survive in that world. You're too soft. This industry's cutthroat. You need connections. You need presence. He gestured around the office. You can't afford this. There it was. The sentence that would cost him everything. I smiled. You're probably right. I left. The research took me 3 days. I pulled Crestmont's financials, reviewed their client list, analysed their cash flow, and interviewed former employees through back channels. What I found was exactly what I expected. Crestmont Analytics was a house of cards. They'd grown too fast, taken on too much debt, and hemorrhaged talent. Their biggest client, a tech conglomerate, was preparing to pull their contract due to underperformance. Without that contract, Crestmont's revenue would drop by 40%. They were 6 months away from insolvency. And nobody knew. Not the employees. Not the board. Probably not even the CEO, a man named Gordon Hale, who'd spent the last decade playing golf instead of reading his CFO's memos. I made a call. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a conference room in San Francisco with Crestmont's CFO, a woman named Diane Ortega, who looked like she hadn't slept in a month. She'd reached out to my fund after hearing through a mutual contact that we specialized in turnarounds. We need capital, she said. Fast. I can provide capital, I said, but I'll need control. She blinked. Control? Full operational authority. I restructure. You execute. Gordon won't go for that. Gordon doesn't have a choice. Your lender's calling the note in 60 days. I'm offering you a lifeline. Take it, or watch the company dissolve. She took it. The acquisition closed in 47 days. I bought Crestmont Analytics for $32 million, a fraction of its peak valuation. The board, desperate to avoid bankruptcy, voted unanimously to approve the deal. Gordon Hale was offered a consulting position with no real authority. He declined and retired to Scottsdale. I became the de facto CEO. My first week was spent in Seattle, meeting with department heads, reviewing operational inefficiencies, and identifying redundancies. I didn't announce my arrival. I just showed up. On Thursday morning, I walked into the main office at 8 a.m. The receptionist, the same one from my previous visit, looked up and frowned. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need one." I walked past her toward the elevator. She called after me, confused, but I didn't stop. When I reached the 14th floor, the workspace was half empty. Most people arrived around 9. Derek's desk was near the windows. He was there, surprisingly, typing something on his laptop. He looked up as I approached. "Victoria?" He stood, bewildered. "What are you doing here? Did you get a job here?" "Something like that." Before he could respond, Diane appeared from the conference room holding a tablet. "Victoria, we're ready when you are." Derek's face went pale. "Wait. Victoria?" As in the new owner," I said calmly. "We're doing restructuring meetings today. You'll be called in shortly." I walked past him into the conference room. Behind me, I heard him sit down heavily in his chair. The restructuring was surgical. I eliminated redundant positions, renegotiated vendor contracts, and implemented performance-based evaluations. 15 people were let go in the first month. Derek wasn't one of them. Not because I was merciful, because I wanted him to watch. I wanted him to see me in the executive wing, making decisions. I wanted him to sit through meetings where I corrected his analyses. I wanted him to realize slowly that the person he'd dismissed as too soft was now the only reason he still had a paycheck. He tried to approach me once in the break room. "Vic, can we talk? About this. About us. I didn't know you were—" "It's fine, Derek. It's not fine. I was an asshole. I shouldn't have said what I said." I poured coffee into a paper cup. "You were honest. You didn't think I could afford this." I gestured around the office. "Turns out I could. I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." I walked away. 3 months into my tenure, I restructured Derek's entire department. I brought in a new director, someone I'd worked with at my previous firm, and gave her full authority to rebuild the team. Derek was reassigned to a junior role. Same pay, different title. He didn't quit. He couldn't. His resume was too thin, and the industry was too small. He stayed, and every day he stayed was a reminder. Not of my cruelty, of his miscalculation. My parents found out eventually. My mother called, furious. "How could you do this to your brother?" "I bought a failing company and saved 200 jobs," I said. "Derek's employment was incidental." "You're making him miserable." "He's making himself miserable. I'm just running a business." She hung up. Derek and I don't speak anymore. We see each other in meetings. We exchange emails about project timelines. That's it. He'll probably leave eventually. Find another firm, another city, another chance to coast on charm. But he'll never forget the day he looked at me and said, "You can't afford this." Because I didn't just prove him wrong. I bought his whole world and handed him back a seat in the corner. And every time he sits at that desk, in that office, in the company I own, he'll remember. Some people are soft. Some people survive. I'm both. And that's what makes me dangerous.